Shannon Turner, and today we're going to learn how to create dashboards in ActionKit. Let's get started. We're going to start with some easier examples of how to add documentation and resources to your dashboards. Then we'll move on to how we can add data from reports to your dashboards. And finally, we'll very briefly touch on how to add new functionality with dashboards towards the end. Another way of looking at this is what skills you'll need in order to make these changes. All of these skills can be helpful at different points, and there's definitely some overlap, but generally speaking, you'll primarily use HTML for adding documentation. You'll primarily use SQL for adding data from reports, although you can definitely use the query builder. And you'll primarily use JavaScript and conditional content to add new functionality to your dashboards. So you might have remembered that we ran a dashboards training in 2019. It's still good. I highly recommend it. Check it out. The link will be in the description. But today's presentation is focused on teaching these same concepts, but with a different approach and focusing on some more different topics with a lot of practical examples. So let's dive right in. First off, what are dashboards exactly? Dashboards allow you to run one or more reports and format how those results are displayed. And these reports can be, very complex, or they can be just one stat at a time. And although you definitely can use custom SQL to write your own reports, you don't have to. You can use the query builder to make your dashboards, to make your reports that are used in the dashboards. So one way to distinguish reports from dashboards is that you'll use reports to get info from the database, and you'll use dashboards to get data from one or more reports and then display them in a helpful way. This is one dashboard that comes built into ActionKit. I used it all the time when I was a client, and it was very helpful to be able to see my organization's open rates over the last 12 months to see, what are the broad trends over time. And if you scroll down a little bit in the rolling 12-month email performance report, you can also see click rates and action rates and unsubscribe rates, spam complaint rates, and hard bounces over the last 12 months, all of those being super, super helpful to spot any new trends or something that might be surprising or different. So how does all of this work? So let's take a look. Right away, we can see when we edit the dashboard report, we have a snippet at line 1, we have some HTML in lines 2 through 7, and then the start of some JavaScript at line 9. Now, I'm not going to go line by line on this whole thing. I just want to point out what some of these things go into in order to create this. And of course, this is built into ActionKit, so you can look at it on your own. This dashboard uses a little bit of everything, and I think that makes it a good illustration of what's possible and what goes into it. There's HTML, there's text, there's snippets, conditional content. It brings in information from 7 different reports. So, the opens, the clicks, the actions, unsubscribes, all of that. And then there's JavaScript to turn the report data into those charts that we saw. So if you were to scroll down a little bit in the HTML section, you would be able to see which reports are being used, right? You can look at them here, but you can also look down here in this include section. And I think this is a little bit easier to use because it also has links that go directly to all of these reports that are being used. So I find this really helpful. I can just click straight on to one of the reports and open it directly. So another way of thinking about dashboards is how you'll construct them. So the most basic dashboard lets you display some text and HTML, but you can also add conditional content, you can add snippets, you can add report results, and very complex dashboards also use JavaScript. So you can mix and match these, right? I say very generally, the least complex, easiest to put together dashboards tend to have, just text and HTML. As you add conditional content and snippets, it gets a little bit more complex. Generally speaking, as you add reports, it gets more complex than that. And the most complex dashboards tend to have JavaScript also. But this is just generally speaking, and some dashboard reports might actually be very straightforward, even though they contain reports and JavaScript. But the most important thing to keep in mind with a dashboard is you might have some of these elements, you might have all of these elements, but as we saw in the last dashboard, the rolling 12-month email performance rates, you can aggregate multiple reports into a single view, and that's really helpful. Now, I want to pivot a little bit because some dashboards in ActionKit are special. And there are 11 of these dashboards that appear within the ActionKit admin. And all of these dashboards are editable, so you can customize them the way that you want to. And you can search in these, you can search for these special reports, or you can find them on the configuration screen. So if you were to go into the configuration screen and scroll down, you can see here are all of the special reports, and this is available to you if you're a super user. You can get to the configuration menu. So here, these links will take you to edit those reports, and if there's a plus sign, then this report has not been created yet, and then you can create that report. But where do these special dashboards appear? Well, you've probably seen these already without realizing that they're dashboards. So this is the mailing mini dash. This shows you your open and your click rates for a given mailing. Now behind the scenes, this runs 2 different reports to get data from the database. One to get the open rate and one to get the click rate. You could do it in a single report, but it's actually less complicated to split it into 2 different reports. This is a dashboard, the mailing mini dash. And so you can customize this if you like. We made that available for you to customize the way that you want it. But the great thing about this is that this is a great introduction for how dashboards work. We have another example, the page mini dash. This is also a dashboard. You've probably seen this a bunch. This shows you how many users took action on this page. Now, this also uses a report to get data from the database. It's how many users took action on this page. And it uses HTML to say, here's the link to all of the users that took action on this specific page. You might have also seen this special dashboard, Your Progress. This runs when you log in and it's on the home screen. This runs several reports to get your mailable users, your actions taken, how much money has been raised, and a bunch of other stats. Now, here are the 11 special built-in dashboards that are all part of the ActionKit admin. You can customize each and every single one of them to do what you like, and we're going to go through some practical examples of how we'll customize several of these. So let's take a look about how we'd go about doing that. And if you're thinking, but Shannon, I don't know HTML, don't worry, because I've got you. I'll show you a way that you can create dashboards even if you don't know HTML. So first off, let's take a look at the draft dash, the proof and send dashboard. So this appears above the above the send button on the proof and send screen of your mailing. By default, we don't show a dashboard on the proof and send screen, but we can if you create the draft dashboard. So if you add something to this special built-in dashboard, we're going to show that on the proof and send screen above the send button. So this is a bare bones example of what you can set up. This has a checklist for lots of reminders for everything that you want to make sure that you've done before clicking send on your mailing. And maybe you can think of other things that you'd put on this screen, like for instance, having a link to your style guide or to your mailing calendar even. So here's the HTML that's needed to set this up. And notice here I'm creating my dashboard report. It has the name draft dash, that's very important. And down here is the HTML. This HTML is not terribly complicated. It's an ordered list and it's mostly text. Now, of course, you can make this much more complex as you like, but this isn't bad for our first dashboard report. So you'll also be getting all of this HTML and lots of other examples at the end. It's going to be in the description of this video. I'm going to give you everything that we cover. So don't worry about trying to type all of this yourself. I really just want to show you and move on, but there's going to be tons of links that you'll be able to take advantage of in the description, and you can just copy paste. Now, a few slides ago, we saw the Your Progress dashboard. Let's take a look at how we'd customize that. On the left-hand side, this is what the dashboard looks like by default. Remember, it has all of these stats here. And on the right-hand side is an example of what you could change it to be. So here, this has how many mailable users and a bunch of all-time stats, like how many actions users have taken, how much money has been raised, and so on. Now, when I was a client, I didn't really find these stats to be the most useful or really to answer the questions that we had. So I changed the Your Progress dashboard to show our most commonly used internal resources, like here are links to documentations, frequently asked questions, tutorials, release notes for some of the latest features to come out to ActionKit. And I also added some internal resources that we used, like stock images, our internal training materials on how our organization in specific used ActionKit. What tags did we use and why? And I also included a bunch of reports that were useful to me. Like, for instance, what mailings were drafts that were going out that day. So all of that was really helpful because I customized it to make it useful for us. So you don't need very complex HTML in order to add documentation to your homepage. It's really this little header to make that orange bar, and we've got a series of links, right? So here's a bunch of links. And earlier I said that you needed HTML in order to do this, but if you don't fancy writing HTML by hand, there is another way. Here I've opened up a draft mailing and I've started to make an unordered list of links in the mailer's visual editor. Then if I switch to the code editor, I can copy all of the HTML code that was generated here and paste it in my dashboard. Let's take a look at another example. By default, the events view doesn't have a mini dash, but there is a lot of information about the event here already. So we can see when or where the event will be held. We can see the time. Here's the host. How many signups do we have? descriptions. Now on the left, there's no mini dash, but on the right-hand side, I've added a mini dash to include a few links to helpful resources that you might want to share with hosts when you click the Mail Hosts button. And you can change this by adding the Event Mini Dash dashboard. So these are just a few ideas of what you could do, and I think this is a really great first foray into dashboards. Add links to our documentation. Maybe the docs page that you use the most frequently or that you always have bookmarked. Things like, what snippets can I use, and all of the pages that you use most frequently. Maybe you'll add links to your internal resources or training guides, especially if you have training guides that you give to new staff members who have never used ActionKit before. Or maybe you want to link to a style guide or how to find images that you can use in your mailings, things like that. And if you make a mistake and you want to go back to the original version of the dashboard report, don't worry, because we keep the original version backed up for you. And of course, if there's no built-in mini dash, there won't be an original. But for instance, this one is your progress original. So if I decide I do actually want to get the mailable users, then I can go and get that back. So here are some links that have some more detail about how to customize your draft dash and your progress dashboards. These have examples that you can copy, and I will include these in the description as well. Now let's look at how to create dashboards that will use reports to display some data. We're going to spend a lot of time in this section going through step by step and getting practical hands-on experience. Earlier, we took a look at the page mini dash, so let's customize that now to add some more stats. First, this is the code that makes the original stats for the page mini dash. And if you look closely, we have some HTML, we have some conditional content, we have some snippets, and we're running a report called Action Takers as well. This Action Takers report is built into ActionKit. You could also create your own report and run it from a dashboard. And you don't have to write the SQL code by hand. You can absolutely use the query builder to create your reports. Now let's say we want to add on to this existing mini dash to add a few more stats. I think this is a really great way to create these dashboards and to expand them. Work backwards. Think about what you want the dashboard to look like and then work backwards to create it. So if I want, how many donations came in and how much money was donated in total and how many average donations I got, that's my end point. How can I go about creating that? So first, I'm going to create this report in the query builder. I'll start with the donations query type. For display columns, I want the number of donations, that's one time and recurring, ever made on this page. Now, if you wanted, you could split this into how many one-time donations you got and how many recurring donations you got. So I'll leave that as an exercise for you. For filter criteria, we want completed one-time donations and active recurring donations. I don't want to include failed donations or incomplete donations. I also want to limit the donations to those at a specific page. But notice that I'm leaving which page blank. That's going to let me reuse this report for the dashboards. Next, I'm going to switch to custom SQL because the query builder generates SQL with the awkwardly named page ID for page. We have ways around this, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But for now, the easiest way is just to rename this to be called page ID instead. So I've switched over to custom SQL. I've renamed page ID for page to just be page ID. And then I have the short name of donations page. So take note of that. And then this maybe goes without saying, but one of the most important things to do is to make sure that your reports give you the results you expect before you include them in a dashboard. Because if the results are way off or misleading, for instance, maybe you forgot to include donations that were successful and only include those, then it's still going to be misleading when you include it in your dashboard. So this has failed donations. This is successful donations only. This is the one we want. Always double check your results. So we have our donations page report that we created. Let's add that report to our dashboard. You're going to need the short name of the report from the earlier slide, which in this case is donations page. And you might be tempted to add more than one set of changes at a time. So like adding all of the new stats at once, how many donations came in, what was the total amount of money raised, what was the average, but I really, really recommend making only one change at a time. That way, if there's any errors or mistakes, or if something doesn't look right, it's much easier to fix than if you added a bunch of things at once. So now let's refresh our dashboard. You can do that by clicking this little refresh link. And when we refresh, we get 75. But 75 what? It's not really clear in this context. We know what it means because we made the report and we added it to the dashboard, but someone else looking at it isn't going to know what this is for. And I included this as like an intermediate step to help illustrate that doing this is an iterative process, and you'll want to go and provide additional context as you go along. So let's go back and edit our dashboard to explain what this 75 number means. Now this, just by adding the word donations and saving and then refreshing our dashboard, this makes this look so much nicer with this data point in context. So now we're going to add another report, this time to get the sum of payments. Now I'm making another donations query, and for display columns, this time I'm adding the sum of payments. Like last time, I'm leaving the page filter option blank. But this time, let's keep this report in the query builder instead of changing to custom SQL. And this will let us see another way that we can add this report to our dashboard. So let's remember to save the report and keep the short name handy because we'll need this soon. Now in the previous example, we renamed the snippet to page ID. This time, we're going to leave it as is with the slightly awkward page ID for page. Let's also take note of this because we'll need it at the next step. Now, we're going to add this new report to our dashboard in a slightly different way. This time, we'll use the report tag, and we'll add this little part here that says with page ID as page ID for page. Page ID for page is of course that awkward little snippet for page ID from the previous slide. And when we used the report tag, donation totals page is of course the name of our report. We'll also add the words total donated in order to give it some context. And finally, I've added a $sign in front. Now, at risk of making this slide too complex, there's actually several different ways that you can handle displaying a currency symbol. For the purposes of this example, all of my donations are in a single currency, so I can just add the $sign here. Other ways that you could handle this would be to use the query builder option to convert everything to USD, or to handle the currency symbol in your report. There's other ways too, but let's move on for now. But don't take my word for it that this works. Let's refresh the report and let's take a look. And when we do, we see that we have 3,000 donated in total. So that looks really good. And then let's round this out with an average donation report. Like the other examples, I'm going to start in the query builder. I'm going to use the donations query type. I'm going to use the average display columns. For the display column, I'm going to use the average of payments. And then I'm going to use, for the filter criteria, choosing only donations from one of these pages, and I leave it blank. Don't forget to note your report's short name, because we'll need that later. And like before, let's add this new report to our dashboard. Here's the short name of the report. And like before, since we kept it in the query builder, we use page ID for page. So with page.id as page ID for page, just like the other example. And here also we're giving it that nice context using average donation. So unfortunately, this looks a little weird, right? It's a little bit more precise than we want. We have a few options to fix this though. Let's take a look. Option 1, we can use custom SQL with some filters. So first, we would convert donation average page to custom SQL, and then we can use page ID instead of page ID for page. If we make that conversion, we can use the reports snippet instead of the reports tag. And so that lets us use the reports.shortname syntax. And then if we do that, then we can use filters like strip tags and float format. And if you took the training on personalizing mailing content, then you're familiar with filters like strip tags and especially float format. If you haven't seen that one, I'm going to link it in the description as well. It's really, really useful. In addition to showing lots of examples of how you can personalize your mailing content, it also goes through a lot of great examples of how to use things like snippets and what these are called filters, right? So strip tags will remove the invisible formatting that exists on the output of reports.donations average page. And then removing that invisible formatting allows us to do math on the resulting number, which lets us use float format to say how many decimal places of precision that we want. In this case, we want 2 decimal places. You, of course, could do 0 decimal places, but I like 2. So I really recommend trying this out on your own just to see how it works. But we also have another option. Let's take a look at option 2. In this case, we're going to leave our report as is, the donation average page. We're going to leave it in the query builder. We're not going to convert it to custom SQL. So we do still need the with page ID as page ID for page. We still need that construction. And if you're paying super close attention, you'll notice that I'm using cash report instead of just report. And this is very important actually, because using cash report lets me use the snippet donation average page. How did we get the snippet donation average page? Well, Cash Report will create it from the short name of your report. And then now you can use those exact same filters, strip tags, and float format that we discussed on the last slide. I think this is the way better option. This is definitely the one I prefer. I think this works super well. So if we refresh, now our dashboard looks really, really good. Now you might be wondering whether it's easier to do all of your calculations in a single report. And sometimes you might want to, especially if you're trying to make your dashboards run more quickly, which can be really helpful, right? In some situations, depending on your SQL code, it can run more quickly to run a single report as opposed to multiple. In other cases, it's faster actually to run several reports. Let's focus on this example though. Creating a report that has multiple columns in it, that's not any more complex than usual, but there are some additional steps at the dashboard level. Here I'm using custom SQL and I have, the count of donations that came in, I have the total amount donated, and the sum of donations here, right? So, and then that's divided by the count to get the average, right? So here I'm getting 3 columns in this report. And now we need to make some changes to our dashboard. For clarity, I've deleted the other reports. This is just this new report in our dashboard. And this does work, but it doesn't really fit the same format or look as the other stat. Now, I think we can do better than this and make it match the formatting. So let's take a look at how we do that. Instead of reports.page donations total mini, which was the short name of that report, we're going to replace it with this. This does look much more complex, but it does give you the results that you want. You don't have to worry about copying all of this down, of course, because you're going to get links to this and all of the other examples that you see. Check out the description below for how to do that. So what this does is it runs the page donations total mini report, and we have a special way of running that called data only, which lets you go over the report results row by row. So here I have a for loop that goes for every row in the results. I want to show the data and then the column header. So in this case, the column names came in handy here. If I go all the way back, these column names are what made these show up here, and also is going to make what appears in our dashboard. So we've now seen 4 different ways and 4 different syntaxes of adding reports to our dashboard. I wanted to show you all of the different ways that you could do it because you might see lots of different ways of approaching any given problem. So I think that there's a time and a place for every one of these ways of doing things, and some of the difference is stylistic. Figure out what works best for you and create your dashboards the way that you like. So here's what this looks like with the donation stats all in a single report, but formatted nicely. And of course, the text is coming from those column names in the report. So now that we've gone through the process of creating a dashboard, let's see some examples of what's possible. I'm not going to go through step by step on each of these, but you will get the recipes for all of these in the description. First up is the draft mini dash. This appears for your draft mailings. Now, wouldn't it be really nice to see the average number of days since the users in your targeting, so these 2 million people, wouldn't it be nice to know the average days since they last opened your mailing compared to your recipients overall? I think it would also be really helpful to see what percentage of users have never opened either. This could be really helpful to know before you send your mailing. So for instance, I can see that this mailing is targeted to a much less active segment of my list than my typical recipients. That might be fine, or it might be a targeting mistake depending on my targeting. Either way, it's something to pay attention to. This can be helpful to set expectations. Sometimes you can even spot targeting mistakes this way. Next, you could add some interesting stats to the user mini dash. Like for instance, has this user clicked spam or not? Another good example would be, what is the user's individual open rate? Just a super quick heads up that if you don't customize your user mini dash, we're going to show you some quick top lines, like how many actions this user has, how many donations this user has made, the sum total of their donations, how many actions, again here. But if you customize your user mini dash, we won't show these at all, which you might have noticed on the last slide, right? So here we don't see how many actions either user has made. We don't see how many donations the good Shannon has made. So I'll include a recipe in the description so you can get these stats back if you do decide you want to customize your user mini dash. And really importantly, this is the only mini dash that we handle in this way. The rest of them don't work that way, so you can customize them as you like. Now let's take another example. When I was a client, I customized our proof and send screen to have a very large list of automated checks to confirm things like the page that we were linking to had the same tags as the mailing, things like we had tagged everything as we had expected, that we had added notes, and so on. We had a lot of checks that we wanted to do, and tagging mailings was really, really important to us. So that allowed us to do analytics and reporting afterwards. So we really, really relied on having accurate tags. We also wanted to make sure that we were avoiding some really common targeting mistakes. So we figured out the most common targeting mistakes that would sometimes happen for our organization, and I wrote reports to check that particular mailing's targeting and make sure, like, oh, you didn't forget to include this group or exclude this group. So here's an example of what one of those would look like with some very bright and annoying error messages. These loud, bright, and painful colors was kind of the point. We wanted it to be hard to miss and really hard to overlook. So here I'm missing the topic tag for my page, but I'm also missing it for the mailing. And this also checks to see, like, do these have, the same tag? Who is this going to? So if everything is green, then we know we can send. Now the mailing mini dash is very similar to the draft mini dash that we just saw. except the mailing mini dash is exclusive to sent mailings. Now, ActionKit does have a built-in mailing mini dash, which we can see here. Kind of like the Pages mini dash shows you how many users took action by default. The mailing mini dash shows you by default how many users opened and clicked. But you can customize this if you like. You could copy what we did for draft mini dash a few slides ago, which showed you the average days since open and some other stats as well. Or maybe you'd like to include how many donations this mailing brought in. So here, I'm going to start by creating a mailings report in the query builder. And I'm going to get the number of completed orders on any date for a given mailing. Now, if you were paying attention earlier, you'll know that we need the short name of this report and we need the snippet code for this mailing ID. If this were a custom SQL, we could just call it mailing ID, but since we're using the query builder, it's IDs for mailing ID. Let's make copies of the donations mailing report as well. We're going to make copies, we're going to edit those reports, and then one is going to give us the total sum raised, and another is going to get the average amount raised. I'm not going to show creating those reports just to save a little bit of time. I'll let you do that as an exercise, but it was pretty quick. I would just make a copy and then make a small edit to the display columns. Making a copy of an existing report is really great, especially when you're making similar reports, because then you really only have a few things to change. And I think this is a great way to learn how to build new reports. So in this case, I really only had to change what's the display column gonna be? And of course I changed the name, and of course I changed the short name and the description as well. Now I'm ready to add all of these to my dashboard. And on the next few slides, I want to make a few mistakes on purpose. We've seen a bunch of examples of working dashboards and a lot of different ways to do it right. But when you're creating dashboards, it's really common to get it wrong. So now I think we're ready to see some things that can happen when you make mistakes and how you can get out of trouble. So here in our mini dash, we're using the reports donations mailing syntax, and that would be totally fine, except we remember from a few slides ago, we need the IDs for mailing ID snippet. We need that for these reports. So when we run this dashboard, we get this error that says missing variables, IDs for mailing ID. Now, one of the things I always loved about ActionKit when I was a client is how flexible it is. There's often several correct ways of approaching any given problem, and that's true here as well. You could either edit your reports to use mailing ID instead of IDs for mailing ID. And so we saw the example of how to do that for the page mini dash earlier. Or you could one by one use the report tag and the with syntax that we saw in previous slides. That works totally fine as well. Now, a third option, we can use the with tag to wrap the report tags around. And then we don't need to include with mailing ID as IDs for mailing ID in each of my report tags because we do it up here. Now, if you took the personalizing mailing content training, then of course you know how to use the with tag. But if you haven't, check that out. It's a great It's a great introduction to using tags like this. So I like this third option the best. I think it's the easiest and definitely the less repetitive. So this is the one I'm going to go with. Now let's make sure this mini dash works now. And here we have two problems, and one of these we've seen before. So first, I think the amount raised would be a lot easier to read if I used a comma for the thousands separator. Second, this average is way too precise. So let's cut it down to 2 decimal places. Now, if you're in the query builder still, it's quite easy to edit the report to show the sum total with commas separating your thousands places. That's option number 1. Another option is to add the commas in your dashboard. So here I'm going to use cash report, just like we've seen before. So taking donations total mailing, using cash report, and then using the donations total mailing snippet that cash report gives us. And then I'll use the strip tags filter again to remove all the formatting. And finally ending it with Commafy to add commas in the thousands places. I like this option better because if I wanted to do any other math on, this amount, this is easier than if I were to have converted it in the report itself. To fix the average, we've seen this construction before. We know how this works. We use cash report so that we can get the snippet for donations average mailing. Then we can apply strip tags, and then we can use float format to remove the excess decimal places. And you could also, say float format 0 if you wanted to round it to dollars instead. So let's refresh, and I think this looks great, right? Remember, all of this is an iterative process. Problems and mistakes are going to crop up when you're creating dashboards. So the more practice that you get in fixing these not quite errors, but making it look better, the more you'll be able to do. This worked really well for a mailing that had donations, but what about mailings that aren't fundraisers? We should look at those too. So this mailing didn't get any donations because it was to send a petition, right? So this actually looks a little bit awkward. 0 donations looks fine, I guess, but like none raised and none average, I think we can do better. So option 1, we can fix it with conditional content. So with a little bit of conditional content and our old friends cash report and strip tags, we can convert how many donations came in. Let's convert that to a number using the number filter, because behind the scenes donations mailing, those results are actually text, especially once strip tags removes all the formatting, right? So the number tag can be really useful here. We convert it to a number and then check to see, did we get more than 0 donations? It's another way of saying, did we get any donations? And then if so, then I want to, include these as well. Otherwise, don't display them at all. Now this always shows the number of donations even if it's 0, but you could also hide that if you wanted by moving donations mailing, this snippet right here, moving that into this conditional content, right, within the if and the end if. It's really up to you. It's a stylistic choice. Another option, which looks a little bit more verbose but isn't that bad, is to use the default filter. If you've created a mailing, you're probably familiar with our user.firstname snippet, which inserts the user's first name and defaults to friend if we don't know their name. This works pretty similarly. So this code up top is going to say if there weren't any donations, so we strip tags, we turn it to a number, and if if there's nothing here, we want to default to 0 instead of saying none raised. And we do the same thing for average as well. So the results are $0 raised, $0 average. So this could be another option if you do want to show the results, but you want to show 0 raised, 0 average instead of hiding it altogether. So let's see another example. Mailing Dash is another dashboard that if you don't customize it, we won't show it. This appears on the mailing report screen of your sent mailings. So here I've customized this dashboard report to show me 2 sections. One is an analysis of the recipients of this mailing, so their average last mailed, last opened, last clicked, and average last score pool, their average score pool score. And over here, the same stats, but for my subscribers overall. So at a glance, I can see that the users who received this mailing are more engaged than my subscribers overall. They've opened and clicked a bit more recently, and they have a higher score pool score. If you wanted, you could also add these stats to your draft dash. Now, when I was a client, I customized this dashboard to show me what percentage of recipients came from a given cohort. Our users would largely join in waves from large campaigns, so knowing which cohort they fit into was actually really helpful. So for instance, it would say, 40% of these users who got this mailing joined from this campaign, 25% joined from this other campaign, and so on. That was actually really helpful because users who joined from different campaigns cared about different things, took action at different rates. And so that was a way that we could, because we knew our list very, very well, we knew, how likely that group of users were to take action on specific issues that we had mailed about. You probably know your list very well also. And so coming up with some kind of analysis that's tailored to you, that's more, that can be more useful even than this, which is also very useful. Let's take another example. First, let's set the scene. Here we have the campaign dashboard for events. This is where you can configure your event campaign, add the creation and sign up pages, add moderation if you like. And there's lots of links to your events as well. So like all the open events, all the public events, all the upcoming events, and so on. Down at the very, very bottom of the screen, not shown yet, there is room for a dashboard, but there is no default. So we don't show it unless you create it. This is a little confusing that it's called the campaign dashboard, but this was before we added a dashboard to this screen. So dashboards can mean a couple different things. So before we add a dashboard, let's take a look at some information that we have available to us. Looking at the upcoming events here, we can see lots of information about each event, right? Like how many signups we have is particularly interesting. We can also see, these are all fake data, right? But here's the addresses, here's the times. All of this is very easy to see at a glance. Now, if we wanted to, we could sort events by most full or most full or least full. We could see how many events are at capacity, see our overall recruitment, but this could be a lot of manual work if we wanted to go through all at once. But another way we could do this is by adding our own custom dashboard. So here I'm going to customize the campaign dash. And when I do, this is going to show up at the bottom of the campaign dashboard screen under users, under email history, and then here's the dashboard. So what's the overall capacity of our events? Well, it's 10,000. What's the current level of sign up for our events? 4,900 or 49%. How many of our events are currently at capacity? Only 3 or 3% of our total. So this is just one idea of something that you could do for your event campaigns. Now, I want to really caution you to keep your dashboards running very, very quickly. If you have to wait even a second or two to get results from your mini dashes, you probably won't end up waiting. You'll end up clicking away somewhere else. So you'll probably never see or use them. Make sure they're super, super fast. This is also a good reminder to make changes and additions one at a time. If your dashboard suddenly gets very slow, it's a lot easier to tell which change made it slow if you make them one at a time. And don't forget that making a change to the underlying reports that your dashboards use might also make them slower. Now, at the very beginning, I showed the rolling 12-month email performance dashboard, which is built into ActionKit. But there's a lot more too that are worth checking out. And if you find one that meets your needs, I highly recommend making a copy and editing it. There's over 30 built-in dashboards, and that does not even count the special dashboards. So let's check out a few. This is the list growth dashboard, which can show you the growth of new users by month. You can also see your raw list size by month over time. And adding charts is even easier, just like these, is even easier than you'd think. This first link goes to our dashboards training from 2019 and jumps straight to the section on adding charts to your dashboard. I'll, of course, include links to these in the description so you can go there. You don't have to type that out. This second link goes to the different chart types that you can use. But really, all you need in order to create a chart is to sandwich your report. We have reports.progress new users chart. Just sandwich this in between this HTML here in lines 82 and 84. And this is taken from the list growth dashboard if you want to see an example. So this is all you have to do in order to add a chart like this to your dashboard. Another great built-in dashboard is the amounts raised by source. So this can show you how many users you have per each source, how many donations have come in, some aggregate stats like total amounts, average per user, average length the user has been subscribed, and so on. And the page drill down dashboard is one of my favorites, showing a deep dive on stats from actions taken on a given page, like for instance, where these users came from. All of these built-in dashboards and more you can find by going to the Reports tab, go to Browse Reports, and on the right-hand side, go to the filters for dashboard, and you can also do WAWD standard in order to see the ones that are built in to ActionKit. Now with our remaining time, I want to talk a little bit about some really advanced things that you can do with dashboards. So in 2019, one client used a dashboard to make changes to several of their event pages at once. So this was a dashboard that you could use to edit your other events in ActionKit, changing those pages. It's really, really cool. Another client has built an image cropping and resizing tool that lives within ActionKit and it works within ActionKit, and you run it from a dashboard. And then another of our clients, WeMove, manages multilingual campaigns using custom campaign management tools. It streamlines creating pages and mailings in 7 different languages. If you attended ClientCon this year, then you probably saw Simon's presentation about this, but he also has a blog post if you missed it. And this blog post is great. It's chock full of screenshots and has some really clever ways they set up their campaigns to avoid having to duplicate a ton of different work for every language that they work in. And Simon also wrote another blog post on how to create users, how to update actions, and how to run reports, all from within a dashboard. And he's very generously made it available to play with in the ClientCon 25 sandbox as well. But I really want to see what you come up with. So please present it at next year's ClientCon. If you make a new dashboard, I want to see it. Please write into support. Tell us about the cool dashboards that you make, because we always love to see what people are making. And if you need help, you can always reach out to support for help with your reports and your dashboards. As a reminder, all of the links that we went over are available in the description of this video. All of the recipes for how to create these dashboards yourself in your ActionKit will also be available in the description as well. Thanks everyone, and hope you check out the other videos also.